Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. Someone suggested I post this story over here. Enjoy. When our first child was born in 2019, my ex-husband Derek forced me to quit my marketing job. When our second child turned 2 in 2022, I discovered his affair with a coworker. By then, he had become extremely verbally, emotionally, and sometimes physically abusive. The final straw came when he lost his temper and shoved our firstborn against a wall. I kicked him out that same day. That was in early 2022. "You can't just throw me out of my own house," he had shouted, his face red with anger. "Watch me," I replied, holding our crying daughter. "You crossed a line you can never uncross." With no family nearby and daycare costs through the roof, I couldn't afford to work. Derek refused to provide any financial support for the kids. "The courts haven't ordered me to give you a dime," he would snap whenever I asked for help with groceries or bills. "Figure it out yourself." He went even further, lying to our bank about unauthorized transactions and getting my accounts frozen. When I filed for default in the divorce, he showed up at the house and tried to intimidate me into withdrawing it. 6 months after I kicked him out, the judge finally ordered him to pay child and spousal support, $2,890 per month. Derek dragged his feet until the garnishment kicked in, accumulating $7,500 in back support. I used that as leverage to get permission to move to a different county. "You're not taking my kids anywhere," he had protested in court. The judge had simply looked at him and said, "Maybe you should have thought about that before refusing to support them." I remarried in 2023, a year after the divorce. While reviewing the court documents, I noticed a small checkbox that would have terminated spousal support upon remarriage, but it wasn't checked. Instead of filing for his retirement benefits, I decided to keep that year of spousal support, around $14,000, and leave it at that. The spousal support was only ordered for 2 years anyway. In 2024, Derek blindsided me by filing for sole custody of the kids. That's when he discovered I had remarried and continued receiving spousal support during my first year of marriage. "You owe me every penny of that money," he shouted during mediation. "I took that instead of filing for my share of your 401k, I explained calmly. "Let me keep the $14,000 and I won't file for the retirement split." He refused, demanding repayment. The judge ordered me to repay it, but increased child support and deducted the repayment from that amount. I ended up getting an extra $25 per month while Derek essentially repaid himself. He dropped his custody bid in exchange for 2 additional weeks during summer vacation. That's when I pursued splitting his retirement account. Derek fought it every step of the way, dragging the process out for 4 years. His obstruction was so blatant that the court sanctioned him, ordering him to pay me an additional $600 monthly for a year on top of child support. They also held him in contempt. In January 2025, Derek proposed to his girlfriend, Madison. In May 2025, I finally received the disbursement from his 401k. I won't disclose the exact amount, but it was roughly 4 times the spousal support overpayment. I had no idea it would be that much. I'd assumed it would be around $14,000, which is why I thought keeping that year of spousal support instead of filing for retirement benefits was a fair trade. If he hadn't tried to take the kids from me, I never would have filed to split the account, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Madison emailed me last week. "You've ruined everything. Derek won't marry me because you cleaned out his retirement account." "That's not what happened," I replied. "I gave him a choice. Keep the spousal support or split the 401k. He chose the 401k split." "You shouldn't have stolen his money," she fired back. "If he really wants to marry you and protect his assets, you could always get a prenup," I suggested. "I shouldn't have to sign a prenup just because you robbed him," she responded indignantly. I never asked to be financially dependent on Derek. He made it clear he would only support his children under court order, so that's exactly what I got. I tried to be fair by accepting the lesser amount of spousal support instead of filing for his retirement, but he wouldn't let me. The next one is an entitled people's story. I never thought I'd be sharing this story, but after everything that's happened, I feel like I need to get it off my chest. It's been a wild ride, and honestly, I'm still processing how quickly everything changed. But I guess that's what happens when entitled people get what's coming to them. Some background: my dad passed away when I was 14. He was an amazing father. Smart, hardworking, and always planning ahead. He was a successful real estate developer who built our beautiful home himself. My mom remarried when I was 16 to Steve, my stepdad. At first things were okay, but Steve always had this way of trying to assert his authority over me, even though I barely knew him. The thing is, what Steve didn't know, and my mom forgot to mention, was that my dad had set up his estate very carefully before he died. He put our house in a trust that would transfer to me when I turned 18, along with a decent inheritance to help maintain it. Dad knew what he was doing. He wanted to make sure I'd always have a secure future. Everything started to go downhill about a week after my 18th birthday. I was eating breakfast before school when Steve walked into the kitchen with this smug look on his face. He was wearing his usual casual business outfit, trying to look important even though he was just a middle manager at some local company. "So, Jordan," he said, sitting down across from me, "now that you're 18, we need to have a serious discussion about your contributions to this household." I looked up from my cereal, already knowing where this was going. Steve had been making comments about teaching me responsibility for months. "What do you mean?" I asked, even though I knew exactly what he meant. He folded his hands on the table, trying to look authoritative. "Well, you're an adult now. It's time you started paying rent. I'm thinking $800 a month would be fair, plus a third of the utilities. You need to learn how the real world works." I nearly choked on my cereal. $800 a month? In what world was that fair? But I kept my cool, remembering what my dad's lawyer had told me during our meeting last week. "That's interesting," I said carefully. "And what makes you think you have the authority to charge me rent?" Steve's face reddened slightly. "I'm the man of this house now, and—" "Are you sure about that?" I interrupted, which I could tell really got under his skin. "Listen here, young man," he started, his voice rising. "Your mother and I—" "Mom!" I called out, knowing she was just upstairs. "Can you come down here for a minute? We need to talk about something important." Mom came down a few minutes later, still in her morning robe. She looked between Steve and me, obviously sensing the tension. "What's going on?" she asked, pouring herself a coffee. Steve spoke up first. "I was just explaining to Jordan that now that he's 18, he needs to start paying rent. It's time he learned some responsibility." Mom's face went pale. Oh no." She set her coffee down slowly. "Steve, there's something I should have told you." But I decided to take control of the situation. I went to my backpack and pulled out a folder I'd been keeping ready for exactly this moment. "Let me help explain," I said, laying out several official-looking documents on the kitchen table. "These are the property deed and trust documents for this house. As you can see, since my 18th birthday last week, I'm the legal owner of this property." The look on Steve's face was priceless. His eyes widened as he scanned the documents, his face going from red to white and back to red again. This can't be right," he sputtered. "It is," Mom confirmed quietly. "John set it up before he died. I'm sorry, I should have told you sooner, but it never seemed like the right time." "So," I continued, trying to keep my voice level despite the satisfaction I was feeling, "if anyone should be discussing rent payments, it would be me. But don't worry, I'm not going to charge you anything. Dad left enough money to cover the property taxes and maintenance." Steve stood up so quickly his chair nearly fell over. "This is ridiculous! I've been paying half the mortgage for 2 years." "No," Mom corrected him gently. "You've been contributing to a household account that I set up. The mortgage was paid off years ago. I used your contributions for groceries and utilities." The vein in Steve's forehead looked like it was about to explode. "You've been lying to me this whole time?" "Not lying," I said. "Just waiting for the right moment to explain things. Like when you tried to charge me rent in my own house." Steve stormed out of the kitchen, and we could hear him stomping around upstairs. Mom looked at me apologetically. "I'm sorry, honey, I should have handled this better." I shrugged. "It's okay, Mom, but maybe we should have a family meeting about how things are going to work going forward." The next few weeks were tense, to say the least. Steve barely spoke to anyone, spending most of his time at work or in the guest room he now used as an office. I could tell he was humiliated, but I also knew he was angry about losing control he thought he had. Things came to a head about a month later when Steve decided to try one last power play. I came home from school to find him supervising some workers who were installing a new entertainment system in the living room, without asking me or even mentioning it to Mom. "What's going on?" I asked, watching as they mounted a massive TV on the wall. "Upgrading our entertainment system," Steve said smugly. "Since I'm paying for it, I didn't think I needed anyone's permission." I took a deep breath. "Actually, you do. This is my house, remember? You can't make structural changes or permanent installations without my approval." "It's just a TV mount," he snapped. "That requires putting holes in my walls," I pointed out. "I'm going to have to ask you to stop the installation." "Like hell you will," Steve was practically shouting now. "I've had enough of your attitude. You may own this house on paper, but I'm still your stepfather and nothing." I cut him off. "Workers, I'm sorry, but as the property owner, I'm asking you to stop work immediately. Please remove what you've installed so far." The workers looked between Steve and me uncertainly. One of them pulled out their phone and checked something. Sir, the work order is in Mr. Stevens's name, but the property is listed under Jordan Mitchell. We'll need the property owner's permission to continue. Steve looked like he was about to have an aneurysm. This is absolutely ridiculous. I paid for this. Then you can return it, I said firmly. Or install it wherever you move to next. That was apparently the last straw for Steve. He stormed out of the house, and Mom found divorce papers on her desk the next day. I felt terrible about that at first, but Mom actually seemed relieved. Honey, she told me that night, I should have seen the red flags sooner. A man who tries to assert his authority through money and control isn't someone I want to be married to. Your father taught me better than that. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly quick. Steve moved out within a week, and Mom and I settled into a new routine. We had a proper discussion about household responsibilities, and I insisted that she stop putting money into the household account. Dad had left more than enough to cover our expenses. About a month after Steve moved out, we got a letter from his lawyer demanding reimbursement for all the money he'd contributed to the household account over the past 2 years. Mom was worried, but I'd already consulted with Dad's old lawyer about this possibility. We sent back a detailed response, breaking down how Steve's contributions had been used for consumable household expenses like food, utilities, and daily living costs, things that benefited him while he lived here. We also included a copy of the household account agreement Mom had set up, which clearly stated that contributions were for current expenses, not property investment. Steve's lawyer sent one more threatening letter, but nothing came of it. I guess they realized they didn't have a leg to stand on legally. It's been 6 months now, and life is so much better. Mom started dating again, this time with a really nice guy who treats both of us with respect. He actually asked for my blessing before asking Mom out, which I thought was pretty cool. I'm starting college in the fall, but I'll be living at home to save money, and because, well, I own the place. Mom and I have a great relationship now that we're being completely honest with each other. She's even started helping me learn about property management and investment, saying it's what Dad would have wanted. Looking back, I'm incredibly grateful for my dad's foresight. He not only provided for my future, but also gave me the tools to stand up for myself when I needed to. Steve tried to pull the respect your elders card, but Dad taught me that real respect is earned through actions, not demanded through authority. The whole experience taught me a lot about standing up for myself and the importance of knowing your rights. I'm sharing this story not to gloat about putting an entitled stepdad in his place, okay, maybe a little, but to encourage others to stand up for themselves when they're being taken advantage of. Oh, and the entertainment system Steve tried to install, he ended up selling it at a loss because it was too big for his new apartment. Mom and I bought a more reasonably sized TV that we both agreed on, and we mounted it together. After I gave permission, of course. Update, 6 months later. I felt I should share an update because things have gotten even more interesting since my last post. Remember how I mentioned Steve's lawyer had given up after our response to their demand for reimbursement? Well, Steve wasn't quite done trying to cause trouble. About 2 months ago, he started telling mutual friends and colleagues that Mom had manipulated him into the marriage to help pay for the house, painting himself as the victim of some elaborate financial scheme. Some people actually believed him, and Mom was getting uncomfortable calls and messages from people in our social circle. I'd had enough. I reached out to Dad's lawyer again, and we sent Steve a cease and desist letter, warning him that his false statements could be considered defamation. We included bank statements showing the mortgage had been paid off years before he entered the picture, plus documentation of exactly how his household contributions had been spent. The letter must have scared him because he suddenly changed his tune. He sent Mom a lengthy email apologizing for his behavior both during the marriage and after. He admitted that his pride had been hurt and he'd lashed out inappropriately. Mom showed me the email, but never responded to it. As she said, sometimes silence is the best answer. On a happier note, Mom's new relationship is going great. David, her boyfriend, is actually a contractor, and he's been teaching me about home maintenance. Unlike Steve, he never tries to take control or make decisions about the house. Instead, he offers advice when asked, and has helped me set up a proper maintenance schedule to keep the property in good shape. I've also started taking some real estate management courses alongside my regular college classes. Dad left detailed records of his business dealings, and I'm learning so much about property development and investment. It's like he left me a roadmap to follow in his footsteps. The most vindicating moment came last week when we ran into Steve at a local restaurant. He was with a woman who I assume was his new girlfriend, and he looked absolutely mortified when she asked about the beautiful house he used to live in. Before he could respond, his girlfriend mentioned that Steve had told her he'd help design and build it. I couldn't help myself. I walked over and said, "Hi, Steve. Nice to see you. I hope you're enjoying your new place." By the way, my dad would be proud to know people are still admiring his work on the house he built. The look on his girlfriend's face was priceless, and Steve couldn't get out of there fast enough. Maybe it was a bit petty, but after all his attempts to assert authority over a house he had no claim to, it felt good to set the record straight. Mom later told me she was proud of how I've handled everything. "You're so much like your father," she said. "He never looked for conflicts, but he never backed down from standing up for what was right." I've learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even or being cruel, it's about standing firm in your truth and not letting others rewrite your story. Steve tried to paint himself as the victim, tried to claim authority he didn't have, and tried to demand money he wasn't owed. In the end, all he did was show his true colors and lose a family that would have welcomed him if he'd just been genuine and respectful. For anyone dealing with entitled people who try to claim authority they don't have, know your rights, keep good records, and don't be afraid to stand your ground. Sometimes the person who seems to have all the power is actually standing on very shaky ground. As for me, I'm focusing on my future. The house is in great shape, Mom is happy, and I'm learning more every day about managing and growing the legacy my dad left me. Steve's attempts to assert control over my inheritance only taught me how important it is to be knowledgeable about your assets and rights. And you know what? I'm actually grateful for the experience. It taught me valuable lessons about standing up for myself, the importance of clear documentation, and how to handle difficult people professionally. These are skills that will serve me well in both property management and life in general. Dad might not be here anymore, but his wisdom and foresight continue to guide me. He didn't just leave me a house, he left me the confidence and resources to defend what's mine and the wisdom to know how to do it right. The next one is a malicious compliances story. Years ago, I worked in a satellite office of a large department, 300 plus people, in a giant corporation. Half of the staff had salary benefits, while my half was hourly contractors. The department was run by two vindictive women who were wholly responsible for the toxic environment. They loved talking about how much they were like sisters. I loved pointing out that when you have sisters like them, one of them ends up under Dorothy's house. Like most companies, they were constantly blowing smoke up everyone's ass about how much we're valued. And they showed that by inviting us to an appreciation potluck. There were going to be surprises and delicious treats from our co-workers. Of course, the other shoe inevitably dropped. The company was providing only soft drinks as alcohol on company property is forbidden, except when it isn't. The only food at this appreciation potluck was what employees were expected to make. Nothing store-bought, share some love with us. They couldn't put it in writing, but it got around that failing to cook something would be noted. It's tough when the company won't give you a budget, but it's tone-deaf and insulting to demand people give their own time to prop up the illusion the company cares when half your staff doesn't get health insurance. The participation non-mandate came straight from the top, and I wanted them thoroughly, inescapably embarrassed. 2 days before the potluck, while on a call with my boss, I dropped the live grenade in her lap. "Boss. Oh, before we go, I wanted to ask why you declined my Outlook invite for tomorrow afternoon. What's up?" Me. "Oh, I need to leave early tomorrow to cook for the potluck since I assume you can't authorize overtime for it." Boss. "Overtime?" Me. "My recipe takes an hour or so to cook, and the actual potluck is another 2 after business hours, so I was going to leave 3 hours early to keep myself at 40 hours this week." Boss. "Wait, you expect to get paid for cooking?" Me. "Half this staff is hourly contractors. Does this for-profit company expect 150 contractors to donate 3 or more hours of their personal time for their own appreciation meal?" Boss. "Oh my God, nobody thought of how this looks. She was asking herself more than me, or nobody expected to be called on it." Boss. "But who's getting called on it?" "Oh, sighs. You're at your desk where everyone can hear." Me. "Correct. Boss, I have to go." I did feel bad about dragging her into it. She had enough on her plate. But I knew she'd just toss the grenade up the chain to people who get paid to know better. Our satellite office wasn't privy to many details, but I'm told my call sent people panicked and scurrying around at the mothership, consuming a day and a half of a lot of people's time. Mission accomplished. In the end, they moved the potluck to lunchtime, during paid time for contractors, and bought our office pizzas. Only our office. We were, however, instructed not to be eating the pizza when we Skyped in because everyone else would get upset. And yes, all the satellite offices were Skyping in like this was the Dunder Mifflin Infinity launch. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.